So you've been reflecting on the behaviors that are needed to be passed along to keep the church going. The interesting thing to me, to kind of throw a little bit of thought in there that perhaps you didn't have, is that um, there does need to be some uniformity, right? If I decide on my own and you decide on your own and somebody else decides on their own, um, it's not going to be particularly effective. And certainly when I look at the generations that are younger than me, my own adult children, when I look at teens and children that I know, and I think about they certainly know so much less than I did at their age. And I'm not saying that knowledge is all of faith, but it's certainly got to be part of it, right? We have to pass along that. We have to pass along behaviors. We have to pass along rituals. Those are all important parts, right? Jesus tells us to baptize. Jesus tells us to celebrate the Eucharist. So at the very least, right, we have some rituals that need to be passed along. How are we going to do that? And so to some extent, institutionalizing or making uniform that information and passing along in an organized way has to be done so that the church does continue. So it's something to think about. What does that look like? How do we organize it? How do we ensure that that happens so that other people can know the love of Jesus and that the beautiful gospel message? I'd like to move on to the second topic or theme rather, that is in Tobit that I wish to share with you today. So, and that's the question of, does God care about me? We have a story in which God seems very far away. God really doesn't have much to do in this story. And it's somewhat reflective of the struggle that the characters have, right? We see Tobit as a good and worthy person, but who's in exile because his whole life is just buffeted by these larger forces, right? So he didn't have a choice in the fact that the southern and the northern kingdoms divided themselves. He doesn't have any choice about being sent into exile all the way over in Nineveh, so far from his home. And then, you have different kings, and then each king has a different tolerance level for Jewish behavior. So he's buffeted. Sarah also is in a terrible situation. She is a woman, right? So there's all the limits that go there. And then she has 7 husbands die on her marriage night. Boy, what a burden that had to be, both, emotionally, we see that emotionally on her personally. And then just all the burdens that come with it in terms of the fact that she did not have intercourse with any of them. So now she's not only unmarried, she's also childless. And she's damaged goods because, boy, with a track record like that, who is going to be brave enough to try to marry her again? Her life is entwined with a demon. Oh my goodness. Right? It causes all kinds of crazy imaginings in our head, and it's meant to. She's in an incredibly desperate situation. So is God a hidden God? That's what Deus absconditus means. Or does God care about us at all? If God is so transcendent and other and amazing, does God have anything to do with the common cares of my life? Interestingly, from my perspective, the book of Tobit points us in the direction of prayer of all things, right? To learn from as we ponder this question. The characters are cut off from the temple, right? So they can no longer go to worship in communal prayer and have a priest lead them and say the prayers for them. So they really have to do their own praying. And you'll notice there that the book is full of prayers and they follow traditional formats. So they use lines and phrases from scripture, from what the characters have been taught and know. Sarah's posture while she prays, she opens her hands and faces the window. One commentator I read had translated that to imply that she was facing Jerusalem, right? But I think more importantly is this openness outward in our body posture that reflects what's going on in our soul. The laments that Sarah and Tobit offer are smack dab right in the middle of the tradition of what laments look like. They're very sincere. I find it very interesting that in the bedroom scene, where we're going to defeat the demon, right? I'm expecting, and maybe you were, and maybe the people listening to this tale originally were expecting this, great knockdown, drag out fight scene. It would be perfect from a Hollywood perspective that somebody's going to flip somebody over something, right? So either between Asmodeus, the demon, and Tobias, or maybe Raphael get in there, and then you've got an angel battling a demon. Oh man, isn't that cool? But it's really pretty anticlimactic, isn't it? Tobias comes in, he puts the fish organs on the fire, the demon flees, and off screen, Raphael ties up Asmodeus, right? We don't even get to see that. Why? What do we get to see? We get to see the praying of Tobias and Sarah on their wedding night. And that's the focus, right? So Tobit is constantly pointing us to, as we suffer, as we struggle, as we go through our hard times, bring what we're feeling to God in prayer. There's also, you'll notice in Tobit's prayers, petitions for forgiveness. And you might think, or as I did, boy, this guy is so righteous. Why would he need to ask for forgiveness? I think it's a good reminder, because sometimes when we're in the middle of so much suffering, or we're in the and we're being really good, we have a tendency to think, I don't even have time to sin. Why do I need to ask God for forgiveness? There's that in itself, right, is a sign we're headed down not a good path spiritually. So we need to keep coming back to a recognition of our humanity and our sinfulness, even if it's just in the despair that sometimes we can voice. Now, I do not mean to say that you should feel bad about feeling bad. Not at all, not by a long shot. Be honest with those kinds of feelings, but at the same time, don't give up hope. There is the message of the scriptures that God is a God of salvation. So anytime we forget that and we choose to believe that other things are more powerful than God, we need to ask forgiveness for that, for not believing in the partner that we can trust in, as God is. I'd like to take a minute to look at one of the prayers here, particularly one of the laments. This is Sarah's lament. Remember the context of it. Her maid has thrown up in her face that she's the one who's killed all 7 of her husbands, and she just can't take the disgrace anymore, and she plans to hang herself. But she stops because she doesn't want the disgrace on her parents, of all things, right? So she's just got such a faithfulness and kindness towards her parents. And instead, she takes her feelings to prayer, opens her hands, and faces God in prayer and says, "Blessed are you, merciful God. Blessed is your name forever. Let all your works praise you forever. And now, Lord, I turn my face to you and raise my eyes towards you. Command that I be released from the earth and not listen to such reproaches anymore. You know, O Master, that I am innocent of any defilement with a man, and that I have not disgraced my name or the name of my father in the land of my exile. I am my father's only child. He has no other child to be his heir, and he has no close relative or other kindred for whom I should keep myself as wife. Already 7 husbands of mine have died. Why should I still live? But if it is not pleasing to you, O Lord, to take my life, hear me in my disgrace." Sarah's lament has some very key elements in it that I invite you to consider for a minute, right? So it's in the traditional language, and she brings up prayers that she knows, right? She starts with praising God, using phrases from the Psalms. But she also is very straightforward about her problems. I think this is an important message for all of us about our prayer. We don't need to hide things from God. We can lay it out there, the whole story, how we're feeling, that we're angry, that we're despairing, bring all of that before God. She points out to God her righteous behavior. Look, I've been doing all these things well. She points out that she is an only child, right? So with all that implies, the pain it will cause her parents, pain it is causing her parents, and it will cause her parents if she dies, the fact that there is no ability to create an heir in another way. And that she's desperate. She doesn't have any more kinsmen, at least from her perspective. She doesn't have any more kinsmen. And so she wishes to die. She tells God that. And I feel like you could kind of translate into modern language as, you come up with something, God, because I can't take it anymore. Right. So at this point, I'm going to invite you to please take a few minutes to write your own lament. You can use some of the elements that we've described here from Sarah's lament. You can use lines from prayers you've known, but take a few minutes to write your own lament, and then join me back again for our next segment.